Hello, juniors. This is the recording for Tuesday, March 17th. Your tasks today are to read this prompt, which I am going to talk you through in just a moment here, and then answer the questions that I've provided in a template for each of you. The questions are similar to the types of questions that all of you answered when playing that Kaboom game in groups, rhetorical analysis type questions. So what we have here is an SAT essay prompt in which you're going to be doing rhetorical analysis. We've done this before in this class several times. We're reviewing one more time before the SAT. We did this with Martin Luther King, Letter from Birmingham Jail, and also the piece about Vietnam. And we've done some other practice with this as well. So the prompt is always the same. As you can see at the top here, we have our box that says, consider how Jimmy Carter uses evidence, such as facts or examples, to support claims, reasoning to develop ideas and connect claims and evidence, and stylistic or persuasive evidence, such as word choice or appeals to emotion. So that last one, you're looking for things like similes, metaphors, personification, imagery, repetition, all of that. I want us to take a moment and just look at the introduction here. So this text is from a foreword to a book. Foreword meaning the introduction. So this is a photography book that focuses on the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, which Carter is going to talk about in his piece. I do want to point out that even though the book itself is by this person, Banerjee, the actual author of the introduction of the text here is Jimmy Carter. So when you are answering the questions, when you're filling in the essay outline tomorrow, the author is Jimmy Carter. So make sure you say that. All right, so we have our prompt. We're going to skip ahead to the bottom, because remember, this box at the bottom is always going to tell us what the author's purpose is. If we think back to the rhetorical triangle, Jimmy Carter is our author or speaker. His audience is anyone who's reading this book. And then his purpose is right here. How does he build an argument to persuade his audience that the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge should not be developed for industry? In other words, he's arguing that this refuge should be protected, untouched. Remember that your essay should not explain whether or not you agree with Carter, but how he builds an argument to persuade his audience. So how do these techniques impact his readers? Now I'll leave you to read the text on your own, but I'm just going to point out a couple of things. Looking at the first 3 paragraphs, what Carter does a lot in these 3 paragraphs is he uses quite a bit of imagery. He and his wife, Rosalind, traveled to this refuge, and they remember it years later. It was very beautiful and memorable to them. And they talk about the beauty of the nature that they saw there. If you look at paragraph 4, he says, standing on the coastal plain, I was saddened to think of the tragedy that might occur if this great wilderness was consumed by a web of roads and pipelines, drilling rigs, and industrial facilities. So now we're getting to his purpose. He does not want this to happen to this beautiful place in Alaska. I'm pointing that out because remember, when you're deciding how you're going to split up your 2 body paragraphs tomorrow, a good strategy is to think, where does the argument shift? Where does the tone shift? And so kind of where I pointed out, maybe a little after, you're going to be seeing a tone shift with what he's saying. If you just skim the rest of the text here, you'll see things like 20 years later, I signed the Conservation Act, guarding more than 100 million acres in national parks. We see that it might provide 1 to 2% of the oil, which isn't a lot. So we're moving more from imagery to logic, to ethos, to logos. So just keep all of that in mind as you're reading the text. And remember, when you're thinking about your conclusion to your essay, how does he end? What is his tone or attitude here? What strategies does he use?